A young man, James, had been saving money for months to finally buy his own car. He wanted something cheap but reliable, so he started browsing online listings. That's when he found it, a shiny used car being sold at half the price of its actual market value. The ad claimed, "Urgent sale, need cash fast." Excited by the deal, James quickly contacted the seller. The stranger on the other side of the phone sounded rushed, almost desperate. Still, the thought of finally owning his first car made James ignore the warning signs. The two agreed to meet late in the evening on an empty roadside parking lot. As James arrived, the stranger was already waiting beside the car. He wore a dark jacket, his face partly hidden under a cap, speaking in short sentences and avoiding eye contact. The deal seemed too good to be true, but James, blinded by excitement, didn't question it. He quickly handed over the money and received the keys. The stranger, almost in a hurry, grabbed the cash, muttered, "Take care of it," and disappeared into the night. James, thrilled, sat in the driver's seat and took a deep breath. The interior smelled faintly metallic, with a strange sourness he couldn't quite place. He brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just old upholstery. As he drove off, the car purred smoothly under the streetlights. What James didn't know was that his dream deal had just set the stage for a nightmare he could never have imagined. James stepped out of the car, holding the cash tightly in his pocket. The parking lot was dimly lit, the flickering yellow street lamp casting long, uneasy shadows. The stranger stood silently beside the used car, shifting from one foot to the other as if he couldn't wait to leave. "Here it is," the man said flatly, his voice low, almost forced. He didn't bother with small talk, didn't try to convince James of the car's value. Instead, he sounded rushed, like someone finishing a task he desperately wanted to be over with. James walked around the vehicle, inspecting the paint and tires. At first glance, it looked fine, but when he leaned closer, he noticed faint scratches along the side panel. The door handle had a smudge of what looked like dried rust, or maybe something else. He asked a casual question, "Why are you selling it so cheap?" The stranger paused for a moment too long, then replied, I need the money. Just take it." His eyes darted around nervously, never meeting James's directly. His hands fidgeted in his jacket pocket, as though he was hiding something. James felt a slight unease, but quickly pushed it aside. The excitement of owning his first car drowned out the suspicion. He counted the money and handed it over. The stranger snatched the cash with trembling fingers, shoved it into his pocket, and shoved the keys into James's hand. Before James could ask another question, the man muttered, "It's yours now, everything in it," and turned away swiftly. His footsteps echoed in the silence as he disappeared into the darkness. James stood there for a moment, confused by the man's odd behavior. Then he shook it off and got behind the wheel. He told himself, "It's just a great bargain, nothing more." But deep down, something about the stranger's words, "everything in it," kept echoing in his mind. James drove the car home with a wide smile on his face. The engine sounded smooth, the headlights bright, and a feeling of freedom filled his chest. But the excitement began to fade the moment he parked the car in his driveway and turned off the ignition. The silence of the night made him notice things he had ignored before. The faint metallic smell inside the cabin grew stronger. It wasn't just old upholstery. It was sour, sharp, and almost rotten. He lowered the window to breathe fresh air, but the odor lingered, clinging to the seats. Curious, James switched on the cabin light and looked closer. That's when he noticed it. On the passenger seat, near the stitching, there was a dark brown stain. At first, he thought it was spilled coffee, but when he touched it, the texture was sticky. His stomach tightened. His eyes moved to the back seat where faint scratches were carved into the leather, like someone had tried to claw their way out. The more he inspected, the stranger it became. On the floor mat, a single old key lay abandoned, not belonging to the car. Trying to calm himself, James muttered, "It's just a used car. Things like this happen." He threw the key into the glove box and leaned back, forcing a smile. But just as he was about to step out, he heard something, a soft thump from the trunk. James froze. His heart raced as silence followed. Maybe it was just a loose tool rolling around. Shaking his head, he laughed nervously and whispered, "I'm overthinking." He got out, locked the car, and walked toward his house. But as he reached the door, the words of the stranger echoed again in his head. "It's yours now, everything in it." A chill ran down his spine. That night, James couldn't sleep. The excitement of owning his first car should have kept him happy. But instead, uneasiness twisted in his chest. He tossed and turned, replaying the stranger's words in his head. "It's yours now, everything in it." Around 2:13 a.m., a faint sound broke the silence. James sat up in bed. At first, he thought it was just the wind outside. But then it came again, a soft whisper, faint and muffled. It wasn't coming from his house. It was coming from outside. Heart pounding, James peeked through the curtain. The car sat in the driveway, dimly lit by the moonlight. The windows reflected pale silver, but the sound seemed to be leaking from inside the car. He opened the window slightly to listen. This time he heard it more clearly. "Help, let me out." James's blood ran cold. He stumbled back from the window, his mind racing. Was someone inside the car? Did the stranger leave something, or someone, behind? Gathering courage, he grabbed his phone flashlight and stepped outside. The night air was icy, the neighborhood eerily silent. Every step toward the car felt heavier. He reached the driver's side door and pressed his ear against the cold glass. Silence. Nothing. He almost laughed at himself, convinced it was just his imagination. But then, bang! A violent thump rattled the trunk, making James stumble backward in shock. His flashlight shook in his trembling hand as he aimed it at the back of the car. The trunk latch quivered for a moment, then stilled. James, breathless and terrified, whispered to himself, "No, there's no way. It's just an old car. That's it, right?" But deep down, he knew something was very, very wrong. James rushed back into his house, slamming the door shut and locking it twice. His hands trembled as he tried to steady his breathing. He couldn't erase the sound of the whisper or the violent thump from his mind. He paced around the living room, muttering, "It's nothing. It has to be nothing. Maybe a loose jack or spare tire in the trunk." But his mind refused to calm down. Every time he closed his eyes, he could almost hear it again. "Let me out." Unable to sleep, James sat by the window, staring at the car in his driveway. It just sat there in the moonlight, silent and still, but to him, it looked alive, like it was watching him back. At 3 a.m., another sound pierced the silence. This time, it wasn't just a whisper. It was a dragging noise like fingernails scraping against metal, coming directly from the trunk. James's stomach twisted. He grabbed his phone, ready to dial the police. But then hesitation gripped him. What would he even say? "Hello, officer. I think my used car is haunted." They'd laugh at him. He decided to check the trunk himself in the morning. That thought gave him a small dose of comfort, but the fear wouldn't let him rest. So, as a precaution, he typed out a message draft to the local police station. "Bought a used car tonight. Hearing strange noises from the trunk. Please send someone if I don't respond by morning." He didn't send it, just saved it. Finally, he forced himself to lie down on the couch with the lights on, phone clutched tightly in his hand. His eyes refused to close, ears tuned to every creak and whisper of the night. The car sat outside in silence, but James knew one thing for sure. Whatever was inside that trunk, it wasn't just a loose tool. As soon as the first rays of sunlight broke through, James decided he couldn't wait any longer. With his heart hammering, he finally sent the draft message to the police. Within 20 minutes, a patrol car pulled up outside his house. Two officers stepped out, their hands resting on their belts. James hurriedly explained, I bought this car last night from a stranger. Since then, I've been hearing noises from the trunk. I don't know what's inside, but something's not right. The officers exchanged a serious glance. One nodded and approached the car cautiously while the other stood by James, questioning him further. Where did you meet the seller? Parking lot, near Highway 9, James stammered. Name? James shook his head. He never told me. I didn't even get his ID. The officer sighed and muttered under his breath, Damn. The other officer called out, Sir, you better see this. James's stomach flipped as he walked toward the trunk. The officer had already slipped on gloves and inserted the key James provided. The latch clicked open. The trunk lifted slowly. Inside, James expected to see tools or maybe garbage. Instead, there were thick black plastic sheets stained dark red. A sickening metallic smell hit the air immediately, stronger, undeniable this time. The officer pulled out a flashlight and aimed it inside. James felt his knees weaken. Scraps of rope, duct tape, and a blood-soaked rag lay crumpled in the corner. This isn't just a used car, the officer said grimly. This car has been part of a crime scene. James's mind spun. His throat went dry. All the whispers, the scratches, the stains, they weren't random. They were remnants of something terrible. One officer turned to him. You said you bought this last night? Son, you may have just bought yourself into a murder investigation. James stood frozen as the officers examined the horrifying contents of the trunk. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst out his chest. One of the policemen spoke into his radio, calling for detectives and forensics. James managed to stammer. So, the man who sold it to me, it was his car, right? The officer turned and looked at him with a grim expression. Not exactly. He held up a tablet where the car's registration details appeared. This car belonged to a woman who was reported missing 3 days ago. The registered owner is still unaccounted for. James's blood turned cold. But the man I bought it from, he said it was his. The officer shook his head. Whoever sold you this car wasn't the owner. He wasn't even connected to her legally. Which means James swallowed hard, dread filling every inch of his body. Which means he stole it from her. The officer nodded gravely. And given what we found in the trunk, we're now treating this as a homicide. James's knees almost gave way. The stranger's words replayed in his head once more. It's yours now. Everything in it. He realized the terrifying truth. The seller hadn't just been trying to get rid of a car. He had been trying to get rid of evidence. The cheap deal, the nervous behavior, the rush to leave, it all made sense now. James hadn't just bought a car. He had unknowingly stepped straight into the middle of a murder investigation. As the police taped off his driveway and detectives swarmed the scene, James stood there in shock, whispering to himself, I didn't buy a car. I bought someone's nightmare.